Hi everyone, so today I'm pretty proud of this video. Today we're going to do something known as Nixtamalization, so we can make hominy and masa. For those who don't know, Nixtamalization is the process of soaking dried corn in an alkaline solution, and the alkaline solution reacts with the skin of the corn and generates vitamins such as niacin. Also important, this really gives corn tortillas and grits their distinctive flavor. This method dates to at least back to the Aztecs, and there's a bunch of really cool history and science behind this stuff. I'll talk a little bit about this at the end of the video, but for now, let's get started. So really, for this whole thing, we only need two ingredients, both of which seem difficult to acquire, but if you know where to look, you can attain both pretty easily. We're going to start with our first ingredient, which is the corn. But specifically, we need a dried field corn with whole kernels. This is different than sweet corn that you can buy fresh in the grocery store or in a can. This corn has been purposely left on the stalk to dry out. You can typically find this stuff online at farmers markets or in Hispanic grocery stores. I got mine from the internet, and the only size I could actually find it in was a 25 kilo bag. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with all of it. I'm definitely not going to use all of it here. Maybe I can think of something to do with it after. So the other ingredient we need is cal, also known as pickling lime, also known as calcium hydroxide. This stuff is alkaline and will break down the skin of the corn known as the pericarp. You can also find this stuff online or in a Hispanic grocery store sold as cal. With these two ingredients, we can get started, and the process is rather simple. The first thing we need to do is create our alkaline water. For every 2 cups of dried corn, we need 2 tablespoons or about 20 grams of our calcium hydroxide. So this stuff is basic. Well, not in the sense that it has an affinity for pumpkin spice lattes, but in the sense that it is the opposite of acid on the pH scale. It's not too dangerous. Calcium is less reactive than bleach or the lye that's in soap, but still I wouldn't recommend breathing the stuff in and wearing gloves if you have them when dealing directly with it. Another thing is that the stuff will slowly react with aluminum, so try to use a non-reactive container, such as glass, enameled pots, stainless steel, or silicon. Now to actually make the alkaline water, we just need to mix our calcium hydroxide with 1 liter of water, or in other words, time to drop the base. Give this a mix, and you'll notice that it's not very water soluble, so just mix it as well as you can, and maybe right before you stir it into the corn, mix it again. I tried to take a reading from my pH meter, but it just told me that you shouldn't buy cheap pH meters from the internet since it wasn't working at all. So we're just gonna let this sit in a bowl for a few minutes while we work on the corn. For the amount of corn, just measure out how much corn you would like to have at the end. So I would say that about 2 cups makes about 10 tortillas, depending on how thin you can roll them. Because I'm also gonna use some of this corn to make grits, I'm gonna use 8 cups or about 2 liters of dried corn. I gave mine a good wash to remove any silt on them. We can then put this into a non-reactive pot, and so for me here, I'm using an enameled iron pot. Add enough water to the corn to cover it by about 2 inches. We want the temperature to get up to just below boiling, about 200 degrees Fahrenheit or 93 degrees Celsius. This will take a few minutes to get up to temperature, but once it does, we can add the alkaline water. So give the alkaline and corn a good mix, and what you should notice is that it'll start to smell like tortilla chips, and the corn itself will become a very golden yellow. This is a sign that it's working. So just turn off the heat and let this sit in a pot overnight. So I came back to it the next day, and it looks like this. You should notice that there's kind of maybe a layer of some jelly on top. This is just a sign that the corn has reacted with the alkaline water. One thing about this is now the pH should be down to a normal level, so if you want to, you can actually go in and touch the stuff with your hands. What I'm going to do is drain the water from the corn and begin washing it. I tried to do this in a bowl for some reason, and then I realized that there are way more optimal ways of doing this, so I used a colander like an old person. I washed mine for about 3 minutes, and at first the corn will feel a little slimy, but this will go away as you wash it. Once we've washed it, we can now begin scrubbing it. Essentially what we're doing here is we need to remove any skin that's left on the corn. To do this, just rub the kernels against each other by giving them like a nice good massage. You're going to want to get your hands in there and rub the kernels against each other. You'll know that you're doing it right because if you pull your hands out, the corn skins will stick to your hand, and you can see them here. One thing to note is that you're not going to be able to get all the skins off of all of the corns. It would just be too much work, but we can remove as many as that we can. Don't worry about going for 100% perfection here. It'll take a few minutes and it requires some elbow grease, but after you're done, we have hominy here. At this point, we actually reach a fork in the road. I can grind the corn as it is to make masa for tortillas, or we can dry the corn to make grits. I'm going to dry some of the corn for grits in a later video, but for the rest of this video, I'm going to focus on making masa for tortillas. So ideally, you could use a grain mill, and unfortunately right now I don't have one. Or you could use a food processor, but mine is also currently broken. So we're going to go old school here and use a mortar and pestle. Just take some of the corn and begin pounding it. It should break up to form a nice, pasty, dry dough. I kept doing this for about 10 minutes to pound up all of my corn, and I got something that was acceptable, albeit not 100% smooth. My tortillas still came out well, but they definitely had that whole grain mouthfeel, which isn't bad, but if you want those softer, thinner tortillas, grinding to a finer consistency would be the way to go. Once you've ground the masa, we can actually add a little bit of water. Now, unfortunately, I can't give you an exact measurement here because it really depends on how wet your corn was beforehand and so on. But my advice is to slowly add some water until it starts to come together like a wet dough. Knead this for a few minutes, and then we're ready. Press the tortillas flat, heat up a pan, fry them for about 20 seconds on each side, and boom, homemade tortillas from scratch. Mine came out more like tostadas, but they were still really, really good. So this, I think, is a pretty method, and it's really cool Aztecs were able to figure this stuff out. They crushed burned seashells to get the calcium hydroxide. The other cool thing about this process, as stated before, was that it creates vitamins that our body could not otherwise process from the skin of the corn. This actually allowed corn to become a staple food. When the Spanish came to Mexico, they brought corn back with them. Problem was, they didn't bring the process of nixtamalization along. Corn became a staple food in Europe and Africa, but without the process, some of the population that relied solely on corn as their staple food began showing signs of a nasty vitamin deficiency known as pellagra. Basically, your skin becomes very scaly and sensitive to UV radiation, so this is actually one of the places where the vampire myth may have actually originated from. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing or sharing this with some friends. Bye!